You're worshiping idols right now. You just don't call them statues anymore. Because what I'm about to show you from both the Bible and the Quran suggests that the man who founded three world religions did it by smashing everything his culture believed in. And here's the part that's going to mess with your head. Both scriptures say you can't find God until you destroy the idols in your own life. Right now, you probably think you're not religious enough to have idols. You don't bow to statues. You don't worship golden calves. But you do worship something. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's status. Maybe it's your career, your Instagram following, or your own reflection in the mirror. We all have systems we're afraid to question because that's just how it is. Both Christianity and Islam begin their entire story with a man who looked at the most sacred values of his society and said, "This is wrong." Abraham, or Ibrahim, is called the father of faith by both traditions. But before he became a father, he had to become a rebel. And once you see what both scriptures say he did and why it cost him everything, you can't unsee the pattern in your own life. Let me show you what I mean. In the ancient world, your father's house wasn't just where you slept. It was your insurance policy, your bank account, your social standing, your physical protection. To leave your father's house was to effectively choose a value of 0. It was social suicide. Yet the origin story of the three great faiths begins with a man who walked away from everything because he saw a glitch in the system. Genesis 12:1 shows God commanding Abraham to do the unthinkable. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. But before that, Joshua 24:2 reveals something most people miss. Long ago, your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates River and worshipped other gods. Abraham wasn't born into monotheism. He was born into a civilization of idols. The Bible frames Abraham as a man who had to conceptually divorce his entire civilization to find the truth. He had to trade the security of the visible world for the promise of an invisible one. Now watch this. The Quran provides a high-fidelity account of this confrontation in Surah 21:52-58. Here, Abraham doesn't just leave quietly. He debates his father and his people intellectually. He asks them a piercing question. What are these statues to which you are devoted? When they reply, we found our fathers worshiping them, Abraham hits them with pure logic. He asks if the idols can hear them or help them. When they admit they're just following tradition, Abraham takes a physical stand. So he made them into fragments, except a large one among them, that they might return to it and question. The Quran presents Abraham as a man using provocative logic to wake people up from a cultural coma. He smashed the physical idols to prove they were powerless. So why does this matter today? We like to think we're modern and scientific, and that we don't worship statues anymore. But we do have idols. We just call them different names. We worship capital. We worship status. We worship technology. We worship our own egos. We have systems that we're afraid to question because that's just how it is. These texts are offering a paradigm shift. They're arguing that Abraham is the father of critical thinking. He teaches us that just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean it's right. True faith isn't about blindly following your parents. It's about having the courage to smash the idols in your own life, even if it makes you an outcast. But being a rebel is the easy part. It's easy to tear things down. The real test comes when you finally get what you want, and then the Creator asks you to give it back. We often talk about faith as a source of comfort. We view religion as something that gives us peace, stability, and a sense of safety. But the central story of Abraham, the story that defines him in both traditions, is not about safety. It's a horror story. It's a psychological thriller about a father asked to do the one thing that goes against every biological instinct he has: to kill his own child. Genesis 22:2 delivers a command that is terrifying in its specificity. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Notice the emotional weight. God doesn't just say the boy, he emphasizes the attachment, whom you love. The text describes Abraham rising early the next morning. It doesn't record him arguing. It shows a man walking in silent, terrifying obedience for 3 days, carrying the fire and the knife, knowing exactly what he has to do. Now watch the Quran recount this same harrowing event in Surah 37:102. However, the Quran adds a layer of interaction that changes the dynamic. Abraham shares the vision with his son. "O my son, indeed I have seen in a dream that I must sacrifice you, so see what you think." The son's response is the definition of submission. He doesn't run. He doesn't scream. He replies, "O my father, do as you are commanded. You will find me, if Allah wills, of the steadfast." The Quran presents this not just as Abraham's test, but as a joint act of surrender by both father and son. They both submitted to a logic they couldn't understand because they trusted the source. Before we judge this story by modern standards, we have to understand the brutal context of the ancient world. In the Bronze Age, in the chaos of Canaan and Mesopotamia, child sacrifice was horrifyingly common. People regularly sacrificed their children to gods like Moloch to ensure a good harvest or victory in war. It was the ultimate transaction. When Abraham raised that knife, he thought he was dealing with just another deity who demanded blood. But when God stopped him, it was a historical pivot point. By replacing the boy with a ram, the God of Abraham was sending a shockwave through the ancient world. "I am not like the other gods. I do not want the death of your children. I want the surrender of your heart." This moment effectively marked the beginning of the end for human sacrifice in religious history. So why does this matter today? We don't sacrifice children on altars anymore, but we do sacrifice our relationships, our integrity, and our families on the altars of our careers and ambitions. The story of the sacrifice is a critique of our priorities. The son represented everything Abraham loved. He was his legacy, his pride, his future. By asking him to give it up, God was asking, do you love the giver or do you love the gift? These texts argue that you cannot truly possess something until you're willing to let it go. Abraham was allowed to keep his son only after he proved he didn't need him to validate his existence. But the story doesn't end on the mountain. Because Abraham passed the test, he was given a title, a status. Most of us are just believers or followers, but Abraham is the only human being in history whom both God and Allah refer to as a friend. In most ancient religions, the relationship between a human and a god was purely transactional. You gave the god a goat, the god gave you rain. It was a business deal. You didn't hang out with Zeus. You didn't have deep conversations with Thor. You feared them, you paid them, and you hoped they left you alone. But the story of Abraham introduces a revolutionary category of spiritual status. Isaiah 41:8 shows God speaking to Israel. "But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, you descendants of Abraham, my friend." James 2:23 confirms this title. Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness, and he was called God's friend. This implies a shocking level of access. In Genesis 18, we actually see Abraham negotiating with God. When God threatens to destroy Sodom, Abraham pushes back. He challenges God. "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" He haggles with the Creator. What if there are 50 righteous people? What if there are 10? Friends speak freely. Friends push back. The Bible paints Abraham as someone who was allowed into the Oval Office of the universe. Now watch the Quran use a specific linguistic term to elevate this relationship in Surah 4:125. And who is better in religion than one who submits himself to Allah while being a doer of good and follows the religion of Abraham, inclining toward truth? And Allah took Abraham as an intimate friend. The Arabic word is Khalil. This doesn't just mean a casual buddy. In Arabic, Sadiq is a friend who tells the truth. Sahib is a companion. But Khalil comes from a root meaning to penetrate or to permeate. It refers to a friendship where the love has penetrated the very core of the heart. In Islamic theology, the Prophet Muhammad is the beloved, Habib, but Abraham is the intimate friend, Khalil. It implies that there were no secrets between him and his Lord. This synthesis offers a powerful lesson in vulnerability. To be a friend of God means you align your will with His. You don't just obey the rules because you're afraid of hellfire. You obey because you care about the relationship. Abraham didn't walk up that mountain to sacrifice his son because he was a robot following code. He did it because he trusted his friend's character more than his own understanding. But friendship is one thing. Family is another. If you turn on the news today and look at the geopolitical chaos in the Middle East, it's easy to despair. We're often told that this is an ancient, unsolvable blood feud. We're told that the children of Isaac, Jews and Christians, and the children of Ishmael, Muslims, are destined to be enemies forever. But if you go back to the source code, you find a very different story. We tend to assume that for one son to be chosen, the other has to be cursed. We think God operates on a scarcity mindset. But both Christianity and Islam argue that the blessing of Abraham was big enough to cover both branches of his family tree. They describe a separation, yes, but not a rejection. Genesis 17:20 shows a moment that completely contradicts the idea that Ishmael was cast aside. Abraham is worried about his eldest son's future. God responds explicitly, "And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation." The Bible confirms that while the covenant of the law would go through Isaac, a specific covenant of greatness was established for Ishmael. God heard his cry in the desert. He provided water for him. He promised him a destiny. The text respects him as a prince and a patriarch in his own right. Now watch the Quran shift the lens to the specific location of Ishmael's settlement in Surah 14:37. Abraham prays, "Our Lord, I have settled some of my descendants in an uncultivated valley near your sacred house, our Lord, that they may establish prayer." This uncultivated valley is Mecca. The Quran details how Abraham and Ismail didn't just survive there, they worked together. In Surah 2:127, it describes the two of them building the foundations of the Kaaba, the house of God, shoulder to shoulder. The Quran frames Ishmael not as the sent-away son, but as the partner in building the spiritual epicenter of the world. So why does this matter today? It destroys the narrative of us versus them. We're used to viewing history as a zero-sum game. If the West wins, the East loses. But the story of Abraham's sons argues that God plays the long game. He planted two seeds in two different soils. One branch led to Moses and Jesus. The other branch led to Muhammad. But the root is identical. When a Christian prays, they're praying to the God of Abraham. When a Muslim prays, they're praying to the God of Abraham. The spiritual dina is undeniable. We're technically arguing with our cousins, not our aliens. But this shared lineage leads us to the final question. We live in a world obsessed with brand loyalty. We define ourselves by our labels. I am a Baptist. I am a Sunni. I am a Catholic. I am a Shia. We draw lines in the sand and stand in our corners, convinced that our specific club owns the franchise on truth. But both Christianity and Islam agree that Abraham is the antidote to this tribalism. They both argue that Abraham cannot be boxed into a later religious denomination because he existed before the labels were printed. He represents a raw, unfiltered connection to the divine that sets the standard for everyone else. Romans 4:11 shows the Apostle Paul making a brilliant legal argument. He points out that Abraham was declared righteous by God before he was circumcised, before the specific rituals of the Jewish law were established. Paul writes, "So then, he is the father of all who believe but have not been circumcised, in order that righteousness might be credited to them." The Bible frames Abraham as the father of faith, not just the father of a specific ethnic group. He proved that a human being is saved not by checking boxes or following a rulebook, but by trusting the promise of the Creator. Now watch the Quran make an almost identical argument about chronology in Surah 367. Abraham was neither a Jew nor a Christian, but he was one inclining toward truth, a Muslim submitting to Allah. And he was not of the polytheists. The Arabic word used here is Hanif. It means someone who is upright or pure, someone who bypasses all the cultural noise and locks directly onto the signal of the one God. The Quran argues that Abraham is the 0 point of the faith, the pure source before the river split into different streams. So why does this matter today? It forces us to check our egos. We like to think we're right because we belong to the correct group. But the story of Abraham tells us that God isn't looking for club membership. He's looking for a specific posture of the heart. The word Islam literally means submission. The biblical definition of faith is trust. Abraham is the intersection of these two concepts. He's the man who submitted so completely that he trusted God with his own son. He teaches us that the only label that matters in the end is not what's written on your building, but what's written on your heart. So let's recap what we've uncovered. We have a disruptor who smashed the idols of his culture. We have a father who passed the ultimate test of surrender. We have a friend who spoke intimately with the Creator. We have a patriarch whose blessing was big enough for 2 nations. And we have a Hanif, a universal standard of pure faith. When you thread these 5 concepts together, Abraham stops being just a character in a history book. He becomes a mirror. He challenges us to look at our own lives and ask the hard questions. What idols am I worshiping today? What am I holding back from God? Am I trusting the Creator, or am I just following the crowd? In a world that wants to tear us apart based on our differences, Abraham is the North Star that guides us back to the same place. He reminds the Christian and the Muslim that long before we were fighting over theology, we were sitting at the same table, eating with the same Father. If you enjoy digging into the source code of these ancient traditions and finding the unity in the chaos, make sure you're subscribed. I'll see you in the next one.